So I think we'll get started. Welcome again to everyone who's made the time to join. This is our first of many live webinars we'll be giving. We plan to give these after each quarter to update you on our company's developments. If you have any questions during the presentation, please just type those into the chat box and we'll get those answered at the end for you. So firstly, we will be making some cautionary, these are cautionary statements. We will be making forward-looking statements. If you want further details on that, please see our website or our corporate presentation. And of course, important technical disclosures, more details can be found in the relevant technical reports available on our website and also on SEDAR. So today we're going to be talking about our projects and the recent developments on those. So we are currently focused in Saskatchewan, primarily, recently on our Goldfields project, where we've received the final assay results this last quarter from our Box Phase 1 drilling. That was a resource expansion program. We also undertook a drilling program, what we call our Phase 2. It was an exploration drilling program between the Box and Athona deposits. Assays are still pending from that drilling. And excitingly, we also announced a PEA very recently, and that study is now underway. At our Strike and Mermac uranium projects, which are right on the doorstep of the Goldfields project, we've been doing some geophysical surveying through the winter months. That's included ground gravity surveying and a VTEM survey on the Mermac project. And initial drilling is planned to start up on those projects in May this year. I should also mention we do still have our Ixhuatán project in Mexico. That's still an important asset for the project. It's really an exceptional geological setting. There's a resource there of 1 million ounces measured and indicated and 0.7 million ounces of inferred in gold resources. The project has tremendous opportunity from an exploration standpoint with numerous targets, epithermal, porphyry and skarn targets, primarily gold, silver and copper. But today we're really going to focus on our Saskatchewan activities at Goldfields and our uranium projects. So going to Goldfields, just a quick recap there. Currently we have 1 million ounces in indicated and 0.2 million ounces inferred, and those are open pit gold resources. There was a historical PFS done in 2011 that showed robust economics, an NPV of $144 million and a capex of $159 million. And that study was done at a Canadian gold price of $12.50 an ounce. Today, that gold price has approximately doubled. The project is endowed with established infrastructure, and it does have a development permit in place, and that's why we consider it development ready. The project also offers exploration and development upside. So let's just take a look at that project on the map. We see there on the bottom right, the Goldfields gold project with the Box and Athona deposits and other prospects, the Frontier Lake and Golden Pond. Firstly, we should note we're operating in a top-ranked jurisdiction. Saskatchewan managed to retain its #1 ranking in Canada and is now ranked #2 globally as a mining jurisdiction. The project has established infrastructure. There's a road to site from Uranium City. It's about a 25-kilometer drive on a maintained road. The project is accessible year-round on that road. There's also a winter ice road, which makes access during the winter months easier. Importantly, there's a power line to site. That branch of the power line is not currently active, but the branch that goes up to Uranium City is supplying power from the Charlotte River Hydropower Station, where there is excess capacity to power potential mine development. The project is permitted for development. In May 2008, the government approved an environmental impact statement for the development of a mine and mill at Goldfields. That permit is still valid today. And to utilize it would really merely mean refreshing some of the baseline studies to show that none of the impacts to the environment have changed. The mine and mill permit is scoped for 5,000 tonne per day processing capacity, and that permit's going to allow us to compress the timeline to get a project into construction. Going to the phase 1 box drilling results. This was drilling that was conducted during 2021, and we started that drilling at the Athona deposit where we showed an expansion, and have now moved to the box deposit where we drilled 7 holes. So we can see those 7 holes on the left side of the map there. And what we were targeting here were these dominant north-south oriented vein sets, which we had seen in the deposit. And so we drilled in a different direction here toward the east to intersect those vein sets at a high angle. And all the holes we drilled, the 7 holes, they all intersected good mineralization. We commonly saw really wide intervals of over a gram a ton, quite similar to what we see in the box deposit, defined by that boundary there, which is the current mineral resource outline, which is an open pit outline for those resources. Importantly, in these longer intervals, we also saw some higher grades. We can see some of those listed there: 8 gram a ton over 4 meters, 8 gram a ton over 12 meters, 8.74 gram a ton over 5 meters, and 13.22 gram a ton over 8 meters. If we now look at this map on the left, that's plan view looking down. We're going to look in section toward the west. And here we see the holes coming toward us out of the page. And on the right side, we see the open pit. Now that's the conceptual pit shell for the current resource estimate. So all the grades shown in there are part of the current resource estimate. And the phase 1 program is really about stepping out from that current resource estimate, taking systematic step outs to expand mineralization. And we can see all the holes there intersecting good mineralization and realizing a total expansion of that footprint over 280 meters. What was also very interesting from this program is we collected oriented drill core, and we were able to measure the structures and the veins in the drill core. And those showed apparent continuity of those higher grades between the drill holes. And why that's important is that it could open up opportunities from a mining standpoint, both being more selective from an open pit point of view or looking at underground opportunities. So these drilling results and the expansion we've realized through this phase 1 drilling is going to be assessed as part of the PEA as we look more toward the economics of this deposit. The phase 2 drilling program we commenced this year through Q1, and the concept of that drilling was really to test in between the box and Athona deposits. In this figure, we see the box deposit, and in pink there's what they call the box mine granite, which is the mineralized unit, and shown in blue are those 7 holes that we completed, for which I've just shown you results. At Athona, we see also in blue the holes we drilled in 2021, also showing expansion to that mineralization. Now, both these deposits sit on the same stratigraphic contact. That's at the base of the Mermac group. And that contact obviously provides a favorable target horizon for more deposits. Between the deposits is only one hole that's been drilled historically in LB 88-3. And that historical hole intersected 4 gram a ton over 3 meters. Now that was at depth. So the concept here was really to go up dip from that into the hinge zone of the syncline where mineralization was expected to be closer to surface and test a range of targets. It was amazing that no drilling had been conducted between these deposits before within that hinge zone. So just looking at that in plan, and this is the drilling we completed. Within that hinge zone, in yellow there, we completed 3 holes, and that was targeting that favorable stratigraphic corridor, and particularly where we saw these larger regional northeast southwest structures coming through. We also tested a hole just outside that hinge zone, shown in blue. That was a geophysical target from the Titan 2010 IP resistivity data, and we completed a hole at that location. And then we also did 1 hole at the box deposit where there was a significant gap in the historical drilling coverage. So we drilled down dip of that outside of the current resource estimate to test for down dip extensions from where we saw some higher grade numbers from the previous drilling that was completed. So this drilling program was wrapped up, and we're now awaiting assays, and we look forward to reporting those when they become available in approximately 2 to 4 weeks' time. The PEA we recently announced is a really exciting development for the project, and what we're planning to do here is really optimize the development path of the project. In 2011, the PFS laid out a good blueprint for development for the project, but we saw some numerous opportunities to improve upon that development plan. Some of those included both on the mining side in terms of looking at more selective open pit mining, as well as on the processing side, where we saw a simplified flow sheet could produce some higher recovery values. So the scope of work for the PEA really includes a mineral resource update. That will be done first by SRK Consulting to produce a new resource model, and that's going to include the phase 1 drilling, the results I've just shown you. We'll then proceed to the mine and mill optimization in phase 1. And this is being done by both Ausenco and Moose Mountain. And that's really to evaluate different business case scenarios for the project by looking at different mining and processing parameters, and then deciding which is the optimal path moving forward before we actually proceed to that PEA study. And then the PEA study will begin using the optimized business case, and that's going to include a typical PEA, which will cover all such aspects for a PEA. And that's really all being led by Ausenco. So just in terms of our roadmap and in summary for what we've been doing at Gold Fields, on the exploration front, we've completed the phase 1 drilling that's produced some good results. We completed phase 2 exploration drilling this year with assays pending. The project development path, we have that current mineral resource estimate that was completed last year. Around that, we completed internal concept studies and have used that knowledge to proceed to a PEA, which is well underway, with results expected in early Q4 2022. Following on from that, we'll be looking toward feasibility studies, pre-fees, and de-risking the project further toward a construction decision given positive results. On the community engagement front, that's obviously a priority for us. We started early on when we got the project moving again in 2020 and liaised with all the community groups and have built some strong relationships there. We've spoken to them about the PEA. They're well aware of what we're doing there, and we've agreed that the more formal project development consultation should only commence once we get into the pre-feasibility stages for the project. But we maintain close ties with the community with regular meetings and site visits to the work that we're doing on the project. In terms of the environmental approvals and permitting, as I mentioned, we do have a mine and mill development in place for a production capacity of 5,000 tonnes per day. What's required to use that permit is really a refreshing of it through the provision of supplemental baseline data to the government of Saskatchewan. We think that's roughly a 12-month process, and during that time we could be applying for this, negotiating the surface lease, and following that period we'll be in a position to apply for the approvals to construct and operate. Having that permit in place obviously allows us to compress the timeline toward development, which, you know, that process is often the critical path for projects. In our case, it's advantageous that that process is largely being completed and the project screened from an environmental point of view already. So moving on to the Strike and Mermac uranium project, some people are wondering why we're exploring for uranium. Well, you know, firstly, when we got the company moving again, we just spotted some terrific exploration opportunities right on the doorstep of our Gold Fields project. You know, we have established a operational base in Saskatchewan, in Uranium City. We have facilities there, and we've got a really good setup there. So it made sense to look at these opportunities. And what we saw was some really interesting target areas that really hadn't been evaluated from a high-grade Athabasca Basin point of view. So what we're targeting is similar types of deposits to those found by NextGen and Fission at both Arrow and Triple R respectively. On our properties, there's numerous high-grade showings, which shows there's an endowment of uranium The geological ingredients are there. We have an experienced uranium exploration team. I've worked with Denison Mines as their VP Exploration for 5 years. And then we have other members on our team who've worked with Cameco, NextGen, and Fission. And obviously leveraging off that operational hub in Uranium City. So firstly, the Athabasca Basin, everyone knows it's the world's premier district for high-grade uranium. And the story there is really historically, a lot of work focused on that eastern side of the Athabasca Basin, where uranium was discovered immediately outside the basin through Key Lake, and efforts marched into the basin where they explored through the sandstone cover. That's obviously yielded some tremendous deposits with mines at, historically at Key Lake and Rabbits, and more active mining at McArthur River and Cigar Lake. But the eastern side, very well explored through the years, still offers tremendous potential. More recently, on the southwest part of the basin, NextGen had made and Fission have made some significant discoveries in these basement rocks, and those projects are at the development phase. And obviously, a lot of attention diverted from the eastern side of the basin to the southwestern side. Now, the northern rim of the basin where we are, there's been less of a focus, but it's got all the right geology for discovery of these high-grade deposits. If we look at that figure on the right, we sit in a very similar setting to those discoveries at Triple R and Arrow. We're right on the basin edge. We'll be targeting these competent basement rocks. And there's similar geology in the sense that there's these graphitic conductors, which are the favorable host rocks for these types of deposits. So Fortune Bay is going to be targeting these shallower, high-grade basement-hosted deposits in these graphitic rocks, and they're highly sought-after targets because they sit within competent host rocks, which allow for conventional mining. We zoom into that area, we see the projects in more detail now. Important thing, firstly, to point out here is these little lines in red, which are the EM conductors that we have been mapped historically. Those are the graphitic rocks that run through this area. Previously, there's been a lot of activity up here on the uranium front. It's actually Canada's original uranium mining district with operations at Gunnar, Lorado, and Beaver Lodge. Now, these are different types of deposits. They're not the Athabasca high-grade deposits that are typically associated with these EM conductors. They're associated with more granitic rocks. They tend to be slightly lower grade. And historically, efforts were really in this area were around prospecting for that type of mineralization. And that's because it outcropped. There were lots of surface prospecting campaigns, a lot of radiometrics done, and a lot of uranium found, mostly of this Beaver Lodge type. More recently, there's been mapping of these EM conductors, and there hasn't been a concerted effort to really evaluate these. So we think this could be another frontier for Athabasca high-grade uranium exploration, given that there hasn't been a strong focus on evaluating these EM conductors through the region, despite the incredible amount of uranium endowment in the area. It's also important to point out on the slide just the infrastructure. The hydropower station up at Charlotte River, we can see to the north there, and running down along the Strike project is that power line, runs down past Mermack and into Goldfields. So advantageous from a infrastructure point of view, and obviously targeting shallow, high-grade deposits makes for a compelling exploration scenario. So if we zoom into that northern area of the Strike project, we have recently announced some drill targets for that area. If we look at that figure on the top left, we will see we have defined some 3 primary EM conductors in that area. On the top right is the VTEM data, which is electromagnetic data, which is collected by Cameco. Cameco also completed ground EM data. And using all these data sets, these high quality data sets from Cameco, we've been able to map out these primary EM conductors for focus. Along these, in these areas, if we look at the top left again, we see there are some uranium occurrences that have been picked up on surface, indicating there's an endowment for uranium in that area. And importantly, the prospecting and mapping that was done up there was all in the areas of outcrop. Now, these EM conductors sit within the valleys. Obviously, being graphitic rocks, they're softer. They would have been scoured out by glaciers. So they sit within the valleys, and they weren't amenable to surface prospecting or radiometrics. Yet, there's a clear precedence for graphite here. It's been seen in a number of occasions, as well as sulfidic rocks, which would also be good target areas. So if we look at the bottom left, what we've been doing, there's never been, despite all the good historical data sets from the mid-2000s, which we've been able to use, there's never been any gravity done here. So gravity is a really useful technique. When Arrow deposit was discovered by NextGen, they used gravity very effectively to prioritize along the EM conductors. So we've used a similar approach and commenced gravity surveying earlier this year. We haven't quite completed that coverage yet, but there's a plan in place to infill those areas starting in May, and that will be done ahead of the drilling. But nonetheless, we've collected sufficient data to announce these initial drill targets, which are shown in the red boxes. And we can see on that L conductor, which is the one to the south, numerous discrete gravity lows along that EM conductor. Now, that's exactly what we're looking for. We think these are really great targets. And then proximity to some of these uranium showings, then proximity to some of Cameco's geochemical and clay anomalies that have been picked up along those valley edges. So some terrific targets to get the drilling started, and more targets should come through additional gravity surveying. So the plan at Strike is to commence the drilling in May, and the gravity to be conducted concurrently with that. We're going to zoom into the Tenor area. Perhaps just jump back a slide here. So Tenor is on this L conductor just to the south. So the Tenor area, there's two targets in this area. The one is really the Tenor mineralized structure. Historically, there's been some mining here. Over 1,000 tons of uranium ore was mined from the Tenor adit in the 1950s with grades of 0.6 to 3.5% U3O8. Now, those are typical basement-hosted high grades associated with the basin. We've collected some verification samples at the Tenor adit, shown on the top right there, 1.75%, 0.94%, and 0.55% U3O8. That verified there are these higher grades in the rocks at the adit. And we've also collected a number of geochemical samples around that. And all the geochemistry indicates that this is a unconformity related system, something related to the Athabasca Basin. And that's confirmed also through just the style of the mineralization we're seeing and the alteration around it. So we believe there's a unconformity related mineralizing system here. Now, Tenor, there have been some historical drill holes completed, 3 of those. One of them, S4, shown there, intersected 1.6% equivalent uranium over 4 feet. The other 2 holes did not intersect mineralization, but did intersect that structure. Now, we don't see those as negative. We see one needs to understand the structural controls around the uranium mineralization before you can actually determine if there's a plunge to the mineralization and then be able to chase it along strike or down dip. So we've developed some targets at Tenor, and we'll be looking to drill those along strike and down dip as part of our upcoming drilling campaign. And then at Tenor South, we've developed a target there, which we're really excited about. What we're hoping to see through that valley where there were some graphitic indications of graphitic rocks, was a EM anomaly as well as a gravity anomaly. And the EM data, if we look at the top right, clearly shows there's some conductance there. It's indicating potential graphite in that area along that L conductor. And when we got the gravity results back, if you look at the bottom right, a discrete gravity low in that area. Now, it could also be related to the thickness of the overburden, but thicker overburden would mean it's been more deeply eroded, and both graphite and clay combined are going to produce very soft rocks, which will allow for deep erosion. So we think there's a good target there, proximal to uranium mineralization, proximal to what we believe is an unconformity related system. And then obviously there's many targets along strike. We've identified additional gravity lows. We move to the Mermac uranium project. This got an interesting history in that, there was quite a bit of prospecting and drilling done back in, mostly in the 50s and 60s, chasing these Beaver Lodge type deposits. A lot of uranium found. You can see some of those grades listed there, both from drilling, from trenching, from grab sampling, but definitely a precedent for high grades. Some of those sit more in these granitic rocks. Obviously at the time, historically, they were easy to prospect, they were outcropping. There's never been a concerted effort to chase those EM conductors, which are those lines shown in red. So there's tremendous opportunity to look at for a unconformity hosted high-grade deposits here, which have really not been evaluated. The geology is just exceptional. We've got 12 kilometers of strike of these EM conductors. What's also important is what's shown in yellow there, these quartzites. Now, graphite in contact with quartzites can create a good competency contrast to open up space for fluids, as well as we see numerous cross faults through the area, which would be also favorable structural settings. If you look at Denison Mines' Wheeler River project, where there's the Griffin and Phoenix deposits, you'll note a similar feature on that project, a quartzite ridge, which runs down the middle of the property. And it's around that quartzite ridge where you've had these competency contrasts in the graphite and allowed for uranium mineralization to precipitate. Here we're also close to the Athabasca Basin edge, just shown to the south. So we're close enough to the basin to be close to that unconformity contact. And a lot needs to be done here in terms of exploration to evaluate for these higher grade deposits along those EM conductors, which again sit in these valleys and haven't been prospected thoroughly. So the plan at Mermac, we've started ground gravity surveying through the winter, and we've been covering the southern portion of the grid. The southern portion is very interesting because there's a lack of historical focus there. There's also more cover. We're also closer to the Athabasca Basin, but the plan is to complete coverage, working our way to the north. We've also done a VTEM survey in April. That's completed. We're busy processing that data. So combine the VTEM data, which will help us get a more modern data set of the EM conductors, combined with the gravity data, is going to help us prioritize targets for drill testing. So moving on from our projects, just to recap on our capital structure and ownership, just 43 million shares outstanding, 15% of the company owned by board and management. So there's that strong alignment with shareholders. Our cash on hand at the moment is around 4.8 million. So that's enough to get us through all the planned work in Saskatchewan, as well as all our other expenditures. And really, just in conclusion, our investor highlights: we're working in a top-ranked jurisdiction, #1 in Canada. We have high potential projects, focused in Saskatchewan, both at Goldfields and at the uranium projects. We also have the Ixhuatán project offering a potential to unlock value through a spin-out or as a pipeline asset. We've got an experienced team, both in gold and uranium. On the management and technical side, we have a really well-balanced board, from capital markets to governance to technical experience. And we really do believe we're poised for growth. We have an attractive valuation, certainly just on gold alone relative to our peers. We have a low value of EV per ounce, and obviously there's a PE underway, which is expected to unlock some value for the company. And multiple catalysts ahead of us. We've got the PEA underway. We've got exploration drilling on our uranium properties. So we're looking forward to having a busy year and with lots of news flow to the market. So I'd like to thank everyone for making the time to attend. A recording of this webinar will be made available on our website. We do plan to have a webinar in mid-July in 2022 this year, just to highlight updates from Q2. If you'd like to get in touch directly, please do so. You can, on our website, if you go to the Contact Us section, you can book an investor call, ask a question, and don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to catch all the updates from the company. So we'll go across to the Q&A session. and see if there are any questions here to be answered. So a question, have you determined the age, dates, and mineralization in Strike uranium project? Older Beaver Lodge versus Athabasca high-grade basin deposits. So that's a really good question, and quite right that these Beaver Lodge type deposits in the Uranium City area tend to be older, around 1.9 billion years, whereas the Athabasca high-grade deposits are younger at roughly 1.4 billion years. So we haven't done any dating yet. That's certainly something we are planning to do, to evaluate and try to discriminate between what are these older Beaver Lodge and these younger Athabasca systems. We do believe from the work we've done and what we've observed in the field that we can, certainly from the geochemical data sets at Strike, both that Cameco collected and we've collected, we do see the right types of alteration and geochemical pathfinders that point to these Athabasca systems. So we do think there's some data already there to support that we're chasing these high-grade basin deposits. And at Mermac as well, we do see these, definitely graphitic rocks, and a lot of the historical reports talk about the style of the mineralization intersected. So we do believe that we are chasing these Athabasca high-grade systems. But I think it's also important, outside of that comment, there's these graphitic rocks which haven't been tested. They're near the basin. There's structures along them. There's potential for these types of deposits. But certainly as we go through our exploration, we'll start to evaluate these occurrences in more detail. Okay, another question here. Will the PEA include both box and Athona? Yes, it absolutely will. The PEAs allows us to include both indicated and inferred resources. So we'll be including everything from the resource update that's currently underway, and putting that into an optimized development plan for the project going forward. Another question here. Fortune Bay has existed for many years, yet was quite inactive. Is this renewed interest in Athabasca uranium? Gold, Mexico, renewed interest in commodities in general, financing success. So you're quite right, the company wasn't active for a while. This was started in 2014 and really held just the Goldfields and Exoton assets. Now, I guess coming on board, myself as the CEO and some of our team, some of us had worked in the uranium industry in the Athabasca Basin and couldn't help overlooking or couldn't help seeing these tremendous uranium opportunities on our doorstep. So we remain diversified and focused on commodities. We think this is, gives the company optionality. Both gold and uranium, we think they're terrific commodities to be in at the moment. And, commodities in general, we don't see ourselves expanding outside of that. We think we have a nice focused interest in Northern Saskatchewan on two good commodities. Gold, we have the resources in the ground that underpins our value, and just tremendous upside potential on the uranium assets. Our financing success certainly raised close to 7 million last year, so we're going to continue to look to the market when needed to finance the company. Another question here, why do you think the company trades at a lower value per ounce than peers? And is the PEA the key to making the company more comparable and thus drive returns to shareholders? Or is there an underlying reason why the market is assigning a lower value? Very good question. The Goldfields project has been around for a long time, and I think it's obviously been looked at historically by people. And when one resuscitates a project and really gets it moving, it's going to take some time to show the market this is something that's going to work in today's terms. And we've gone about doing that. I think on the exploration front, we've shown we made some good drilling results. We've shown the mineralization is still open. We're producing results that we believe will be included in the resource update. And then through the PEA, we're going to take all that and show there's an optimized development path moving forward. So I think that is going to unlock some value, and it's going to show us how comparable we are to peers. And I believe the PEA is going to, putting it in front of the market, will show this new plan to the market and show how this project can work in today's environment. And of course, we must remember that the previous PFS was done at a much lower Canadian gold price. We almost double that today. So we're really excited to get through that PEA and announce results. Another question: potential shareholders should bring that which is most needed or fixes or complements the present greatest project need. So what is the greatest challenge facing your Goldfields project? You know, we don't see any particular challenges there. You know, we've got a good resource. The project's permitted. It's got infrastructure. I guess the challenge is optimizing at development. You know, we talk about unlocking true value or unlocking the real value on that project, the true potential, and that's really the challenge, is to make sure we can put together a development plan that's going to make the most of the resources there. As you would have seen, the deposits do sit near the edge of Lake Athabasca, and that's obviously something we need to work with and work around. And it's certainly achievable. You know, we do see the 2011 PFS did exactly that and complied with the EIS, and there are ways to do that. So there is, you know, some challenges there to work around, but I think in terms of certainly also some of the grades we've seen at Box, there was also underground potential, which obviously has different or lower impacts and doesn't impact on that. So it's something we're looking at, and we'll evaluate it through these stages of the PEA. Another question here about Mexico, any value there? Well, there's certainly value. I mean, you know, there's the 1.7 million ounces of gold across the categories. It's also 6.7 million ounces in silver. That's at the Campamento deposit. Outside of that, there's numerous other targets on the property. Some have been drilled. Across the rest of the property, there's really high gold values in soils, in the soil coverage that's been collected to date, commonly finding a gram a ton in soil samples. And all the drilling that was being done historically there was really targeting those soil anomalies. There's really been a lack of geophysics. So we believe geophysics there can help delineate targets better and lead to more drilling success. If you look at the regional setting of that project, it's really quite exceptional. Below it's a huge magnetic anomaly, which is this porphyry system, and the porphyry system outcrops in places or otherwise is buried by thinner rock cover. So there's this big system there that's really undervaluated. You know, our plan with that project is really to spin it out. We have chatted to numerous people about that, got quite close with some, but haven't quite arrived at the right transaction that really honors the value there. So it's something we need to work on to unlocking value. Another question: would you consider expanding your property profile? Well, not at present. You know, we believe we've got our hands full and nicely focused in Saskatchewan with some tremendous opportunity. But of course, as a explorer and developer, we continue to look out for new properties and things that might fit us to create some sort of a pipeline. You know, we have ambitions to become a mid-tier explorer developer. So any properties that would be accretive and could complement our portfolio is something we could look at, certainly in the mid to longer term, to develop a pipeline for the company. Another question: would you then say that your meeting of the potential future environmental challenges is your most considerable potential challenge? I imagine that relates to the Goldfields project. So because the project's been screened historically through an EIS and it's all well documented, you know, we believe there is a precedent there to moving it forward. That permit's still in place. So it's a case of updating that baseline data and making sure that the plan going forward is not going to have substantially greater impacts. And then we can actually lean on that historical EIS. So environmental concerns, certainly even from 10 years ago when the 2011 PFS was done, things continue to evolve and change. So it's obviously our commitment to make sure we do things in a sustainable manner and address any challenges in that regard. But Goldfields, we also have to remember, it's in a historical mining area, and the Goldfields project itself at the Box deposit actually been mined historically. So there is a precedent for mining in that area, and going forward, in terms of today's standards and best practices, things can certainly also be done better. So we're going to look to really mitigate against all those impacts, while obviously complying entirely with the approved EIS and any amendments required to that. Another question here, are there any ejido issues for the Mexican property? There's certainly challenges there. The Mexican property, there's a number of ejidos, which are local community groups in the property area, and you do need to negotiate access with those ejidos to gain access. Now, we've done that historically. Our chairman ran Linear Gold, which worked that property for a number of years, made the discovery at Campamento, did delineation drilling and other exploration. We still work with the same people, community people in Mexico that successfully undertook the community engagement at that point. And we've recently had people on the project, talking to locals. We've inspected our facilities down there, and we certainly see a path for moving that project forward. But it is going to take some, an effort to reestablish and negotiate those agreements again. But it's certainly not. We don't see that as insurmountable, and it's certainly a project we believe we can move forward in the near to mid-term as things allow, or through a partner. Another question here, what is your proposed metal extraction methodology at your Goldfields project? Well, there's the 2011 PFS had a flow sheet there, which included gravity, flotation, leach, followed by Merrill-Crowe. It was an overly complicated flow sheet for the type of deposit. It's the gold mineralization at Goldfields is very simple. It's very clean in that it doesn't have any other elements. It's primarily free gold. A lot of it you can pull out through gravity. So we're envisaging simplifying that flow sheet to omit the flotation and go straight to a more whole rock bulk leach, and then omit the Merrill-Crowe. I mean, the Merrill-Crowe is more aligned with silver projects that have silver as well. So we'll go to a more simplified carbon and pulp. So overall, simplifying the flow sheet to do a more whole rock gravity, whole rock leach, and then a carbon and pulp. And we've seen Fortune Bay did some metallurgical work in 2015 that showed gold recoveries could be increased from around 90% to 94, 95% based on that simplified flow sheet. So that's something that will be included in the PEA. And I think we've reached the end of our questions. There's one more. What percentage of gold at Goldfields, if any, to be extracted is associated with sulfides? It's a good question. There would be some data in our metallurgical files to help answer that. I don't know exactly the number on that, but gold it's either sitting free in the quartz veins, or it's sitting associated with sulfides, often within fractures in the sulfides or on the edge of sulfides. So there is certainly association with the sulfides, but nothing that suggests anything that's strongly refractory in nature. But the exact percentage, I'm not quite sure. The overall sulfide content of the mineralization is only around 0.2, 0.3%. So it's a very low sulfide content overall. So it doesn't pose a significant issue. Certainly in terms of processing, or in terms of the waste rock, the tailings management. Another question here on met recovery: how much of the gold is coarse and could be recovered by gravity? So yes, in the previous work, about 50% is recoverable through gravity. So there is quite a lot of coarse gold, and a lot of that obviously is free gold. So gravity is going to be a really effective way to bring out some of that early gold in the recovery process. And I think we're at the end of our questions. So if there's no more, we'll let everyone go. I appreciate everyone's time. One more. Is there any open pitting at Goldfield? None to date. There's the historical mine at Goldfields was an underground mine. I guess back in those days, that was a preferred way of going at mining, but no open pitting at Goldfields yet. But that was part of the EIS that was submitted in 2008, and the 2011 PFS also proposed open pit developments at Box and Athona in compliance with the approved EIS for the project. So I think we'll leave it at that, everyone. If there are any more questions, please feel free to get in touch with us directly through an investor call, or just ask a question on our website. I hope you enjoyed that. It's a pity I can't see you or talk to you, but it's been good sharing our Q1 updates, and please stay in touch. Thank you. Bye for now.